Hey everybody, I'm going to do a quick mic check. Looks like everything is going pretty well. Everything is swimming. Fantastic. So, my name's Nathan. I used to do videos about like weapons and stuff like that. I'm kind of not doing that so much anymore. I'm just doing like write-ups and all that kind of stuff. But I wanted to take like a quick moment to talk about what has been going on in terms of the Destiny world. With Niobe Labs, with new weapons like Izanagi's Burden and the Jotun and some other things, and basically just to present my feedback to Bungie and to other community members as far as the type of player that I enjoy playing this game as, or to at least cover that kind of feedback bracket. So I wanted to make this video basically just to talk about everything that has come and gone in the last couple of weeks. Black Armory, Niobe Labs, quest lines for Izanagi's Burden, extended quest lines, the introduction of forging mechanics, and all that kind of good stuff. So it's a bit of a long video, and I wanted to make sure that I had some pretty decent footage in the background for whatever it is. So if you're watching, I'm doing the Izanagi quest in the background. So for me, first I'll start off talking about the Izanagi quest, or Izanagi's Burden, because that's the most relevant as of right now. The quest itself is fairly involved. It's not a weapon that Bungie is just handing out. The Izanagi's Burden is definitely, especially to a solo player that I tend to be, Izanagi's Burden is very challenging to get. In the background you'll see that I am doing the Shattered Throne solo as a hunter. Hunters are not my main class, by the way, but that happened to be the class that had the rare bounty from the forges, so that was the class that I was dedicated to completing this with. So I had to use my non-main class to complete the Shattered Throne solo, which I had only ever done as a warlock previously. And that was a lot of work. I couldn't put together a fire team in order to complete this quest, or in order to complete this quest step, so I had to set aside a pretty sizable amount of time. It was about 4 hours, I think, it took me this run to get this done, because I had to figure out what subclass worked where and all that kind of stuff. I was above in light, which does help quite a bit, but doing something when you're not on a main class and when you don't have something like Well of Radiance, which is pretty much busted in PvE, yeah, it was pretty challenging. But I think that kind of stuff is important to have in the game, because there's no real constraint on the player as long as LFG exists, or as long as Fireteam exists. Destiny is a social game, and I think that weapons do need to have, or acquiring weapons should be, especially exotic weapons like Izanagi's Burden, I think those are weapons that deserve and require extensive quest lines like this to accomplish. Yeah, it's a lot of work in order to accomplish earning this weapon in the game, especially for somebody like me that had to go through and basically just re-solo the Shattered Throne and solo all the other missions and all that kind of stuff. It was a lot of work. The only thing that I didn't solo was the Pyramidion step. And I don't have footage of that, but I LFG'd a group together and did that. But I did solo everything else as far as this quest line is concerned for the Izanagi's Burden, and it was, I will admit, a lot of work to get the weapon. A lot of people don't think that Izanagi's Burden is really worth its salt, so to speak, when they get it. And to be fair, it's not the most exceptional weapon at base in the current sandbox, but there are some things about Izanagi's Burden that tip it into the realm of, wow, this is a really good gun and I really like it. But that's a topic for another day. So I do want to talk about the Niobe Labs, because I haven't really had a chance to really express my feelings about the whole Niobe Labs situation. But overall, I think Niobe Labs was it was just like one of the most fun things to do in Destiny over the last year. I know a lot of people moan and groan about that and say, oh my god, it was so much work, and you know, it's not fair that Bungie was forcing people into doing all these quests, and yeah, I don't agree that not having a checkpoint system was the way to go. Like, yeah, of course, they could have implemented the lab situation a lot better especially for the people that were in the labs doing all the grinding and doing all the testing, like Glad and Dado. Miss 5000 Watts and Holzman and CZ Kuhn were also doing quite a bit of it. Ninji was like up for hours doing this. Like, there were a lot of people involved in doing this that spent very sizable amounts of time just sitting in the labs, shaking their heads at what to do. And that's probably because the lab system itself, requiring you to clear multiple stages and input codes every single time without a checkpoint, that was very tedious, and it was not very user-friendly. I do think that there is a certain degree of game design that does focus around, or should focus around, not inconveniencing your player base. And I've used that phrase a couple of times in write-ups in the past, where if you're designing a game, I feel like one of the core principles should be, don't impose impositions on your player base. Like deleting shaders one at a time. That's an imposition on the player base. Making inefficient routes to endgame objectives, or making inefficient routes to normal, tedious day-to-day interactions with the game. Those are impositions on the player, and in an event that ultimately is very rigorous and very intensive on the player for inputting codes and solving riddles, don't impose impositions on the player when they're already having to do so much already. Now, that being said, I think Niobe Labs was probably one of the best, most in-depth, most engaging puzzles in the entire franchise. A lot of people will harken back to Outbreak Prime, and that's cool. You know, it was a fairly direct quest line in that it was using binary code, and then it had mathematical process in order to unlock it and all that kind of stuff, which is cool. And it was there from the beginning, and nobody knew about it, and that's what was making it unique. It was a secret that was discovered. That goes back to implementation, comparing a secret that's discovered versus a secret that is, you know, intentionally put in front of you. I think is a different design goal. But I think ultimately Niobe Labs is the better, more involved, in-depth puzzle, because it took multiple weeks with some very in-depth problem solving and riddle solving, and it was just a very in-depth puzzle. And for the people that did engage with the actual puzzle, it was a very interesting mechanic to have in the game. And whoever designed this puzzle, I want to personally thank you, because having stuff like that in the game, or the group of people that designed that puzzle, I want to say thank you, because while you might be getting some flack from the rest of the community for the overall depth and scale of the puzzle, I think that kind of stuff is what makes Destiny really amazing. The out-of-game digging through our own history and learning new languages. Like, I learned Nordic runes through working the decoding ciphers. I learned a lot about history. I learned a lot about stuff that I just didn't know. I learned about different cipher mechanisms and code shifts and all that kind of stuff. It was just a very engaging process. And it was engaging to me because it was something that I wanted to solve and be a part of. And that's one of the parts of this game that I really enjoy, is that aspect of finding something in it that is rewarding and worth chasing after and stimulating. I found this entire puzzle to be extremely stimulating, and it was a joy to be a part of. I really enjoyed the entire process. Now, yeah, when Niobe Labs dropped, and it was 4 days in and nobody had solved it because we were missing a puzzle piece and all that kind of stuff, yeah, that's frustrating, especially to the people that are just plugging numbers, essentially, or plugging codes. Like, that to them is frustrating. But still, looking back on it, like, in a couple of years when we're retrospectively looking back on the process, are we going to remember the failed implementation of a puzzle, or are we going to remember the weeks building into solving this? If you weren't actively involved in solving any of the pieces, or you weren't interested in solving any of the puzzle codes, yeah, you're probably going to remember the code missing from the final step and all that fiasco. But if you were involved in the puzzle, you'll probably remember the puzzle. And the puzzle itself was next level. It was something that was truly, truly good. Could it have used some better hints here and there? I don't know. Like, I really don't know. Like, there's some things where it's just like, you know, every once in a while I want like a real challenge. And I think that this was a real challenge. I don't think that putting it in front of the rest of the content for the vast majority of people was the right call. But what it does do is it calls attention to the community in the sense that, hey, you don't like that you can't get to your content? Well, why don't you check out the amount of effort that people are going to unlock that content for you? Why don't you go into a Twitch chat and check out the multiple thousands of people plugging in suggestions for other community members to try out in one of the most difficult activities currently in the game to try and unlock something for the rest of the community? Why don't you go and check that out? Why don't you go and check out the multiple weeks worth of in-depth digging into our own history, into cracking ciphers that were intentionally put into the game to make this game more engaging? Why don't you get more involved in the game? Why don't you just take a step back from wanting and needing new stuff all the time and look at what you have? Like, that's the one thing that I really enjoy about this kind of process and the way that they put this content out, is that it really showed, it put a huge spotlight on the amount of work that goes into cracking one of these puzzles. It put a huge spotlight on the puzzle itself. It put a huge spotlight on the mystery of the puzzle, and it put a huge spotlight on our own history as people. And it encouraged doing something more than just shooting aliens in the face. And it took a lot of involvement from a lot of different people to come together to solve it. And it really highlighted the best aspects of this community. Yeah, 4 days in when nobody's got sleep and they're talking about doing stuff to people and things that they shouldn't be, you know, like Glad, I'm sure you've seen his rant. I was there when he was ranting about it live and it was hilarious. But the main point is, when you get tired of a puzzle and you're just smashing your head against the wall, you're gonna be upset, you're gonna be angry. But it's that experience, that God, I don't know what else to do experience, and then getting through it anyways. Like, that's just something that's really, really, really fun in retrospect, you know, for a lot of people. And I had a great time being a part of the community doing this event. I just thought it was a good event. I thought it was fun. I think, yeah, there were some mistakes made here and there. Missing a few of the codes, probably not that great. Some of the codes could have been a little bit more clear. And I'm sure that the community has its own opinions, but personally I found this entire Niobe Labs situation to be extremely engaging, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. So I wanted to thank whoever put that puzzle together. Personally, whoever did that, thank you. Please pass the memo along. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed going into the Volundeer Forge and trying to pick apart different aspects of the codes, and I liked having something to think about over the last month that was just very encompassing. It was something that I could sit down when I wanted to, try and chip away at a puzzle. It was very engaging, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the depth, and I enjoyed the interaction, and I enjoyed the way that the puzzle tied into the history of the families that created the Black Armory, and I enjoyed the lineage and the thematic depth to the puzzle. I thought it was a great implementation, and I thought that it was a nice addition to the game and to the lore and to the sandbox, and I think that it was just a well done puzzle. So thank you. So now that that's done, I can talk about what else can I talk about? I guess like Izanagi's Burden and Jotun and all that other stuff, and kind of what's coming in the future. We don't really know what's coming in the future. Izanagi's Burden is pretty sweet, and Jotun is something that I'm trying to get. So that's that topic covered. I guess there's not really much to say there. I guess I could talk about the rest of the quest lines that could be a little bit disconcerting for people that aren't in like dedicated playgroups. They're pretty extensive. They're a little the one part of the step that I didn't really like to obtain Izanagi's Burden, by the way, was having that rare bounty. It's a little RNG. I don't really like having too much RNG factored into like questline stuff like that. Like random drops is fine, but when you're doing like a questline, I like a little bit more direct routes to questline steps. So the rare bounty, for those that didn't know about it, it was data mine that you needed to have one of the rare bounties from the Forge in order to obtain an obsidian accelerator that was part of the Izanagi's Burden quest step. Had I been involved in designing a quest, like if you were to ask, you know, like an outside source, I would say probably just tie it to completing bounties. You know, like Powerful Forge counts as 5 completions or something like that, and then you have to complete like 15 weekly bounty or 15 daily bounties or something like that. You know, that's 3 days worth of bounties, and then you can go to the next step. You know, it's not too involved, but there's no RNG. It's a little bit of time gating. And I know that people don't really enjoy time gating in this game, but ultimately it prevents the problem of, well, I saved up 20 bounties and I still didn't get a rare bounty. You know, like RNG can be good and it can be fairly gratuitous, but it can also be very punishing. And I have heard stories of people just not getting the rare bounties at all, and that's not a good place to be in. So I think in the future I'd probably take away that kind of RNG aspect of doing exotic quests, but ultimately I think that it was a good quest line. Definitely getting Izanagi's Burden was a challenge. Again, like I said, I had to solo queue the Shattered, or I had to solo the Shattered Throne because I don't have a dedicated friends list that plays this game any longer. I had the LFG, the Pyramidion, and then, as you see in the background, I soloed the final mission. I think I died once and got it the second attempt. But it was a lot of work. It was a very involved process. And was it worth the wait? Was it worth the effort? I think Izanagi's Burden is probably my favorite sniper rifle in the game currently, and probably in the entire franchise. So yeah, I'd say it was worth the effort. You can feel free to disagree with me about that, and I think that Izanagi's Burden isn't going to be the weapon that excels and exceeds above and beyond any other sniper rifle, but it's just such a gorgeous weapon. It sounds so good. It feels and handles very well when it's catered to, and when you get used to the weapon, it's a thing of beauty. So I do want to say thank you again to the designers, to the Sandbox team. I'm looking forward to the Sandbox update. I think Izanagi's Burden is going to be an amazing weapon in the new Sandbox. And I wanted to say thanks for Bungie and all the people that were involved in Niobe's Torment and design for the Niobe Labs. I think Black Armory has been an excellent expansion. So thanks for all your hard work, guys. This is Just Whip signing out. Have a good day.